You don't forget the sound a phone makes when it ruins your life. Mine buzzed once, a short vibration on the kitchen counter, almost polite. I glanced at the screen and saw a name that didn't belong there. Left my jacket upstairs. Don't tell Ron I stopped by. That was Wayne, my best friend for 15 years. My wife's phone. Everything inside me went silent. Not angry, not broken, just silent, like a machine shutting down to prevent overload. For a long moment, I stared at that message, realizing I was reading the end of something that had taken decades to build. My name is Ronald Winters, 52 years old, owner of Ironwood Forge, a heavy equipment contracting company I built from nothing but calloused hands and stubborn hours in Spokane, Washington. 15 years married to Cheryl. 15 years calling Wayne my brother. 15 years believing loyalty was still a real thing. That night, the house smelled faintly of reheated dinner. My work boots tracked the dust of job sites across the kitchen tile. The wall clock read 9:30 p.m. Late, but normal for a man chasing a contract, big enough to double his business. Big project, I said automatically when Cheryl asked why I was late. She nodded, lips tight. Her phone was face down beside her plate. If you've ever lived through betrayal, you know it doesn't arrive with thunder. It drips, a look, a pause, a lie told softly enough to sound like routine. I had been too tired to hear it. For weeks she'd been different, distant, distracted. Her laughter turned into small, polite smiles. Her book club nights stretched later, and Wayne, my friend, my investor, the godfather to our son, suddenly found reasons to stop by when I wasn't home. I told myself it was nothing. You can't build a company from scratch if you doubt every partner. So I trusted. And that trust became the perfect cover for deceit. I remember drying my hands that evening while she mentioned Wayne had called. Her tone was too casual. Wanted to know if we're still on for the barbecue this weekend, she said. I said sure. Tell him I'll bring the steaks. She smiled. A smile that didn't touch her eyes. Then the phone buzzed again. She turned it over, read something, and that second smile appeared. The soft one people make when they're somewhere else entirely. I didn't say a word. I just nodded and went upstairs for a shower. But inside, that old instinct, the one that tells you when a deal is going sideways, began to stir. The same feeling I'd had when a competitor tried to undercut my bid years ago. The same knot that said, something's wrong. Pay attention. Under the hot water, I thought about Wayne's new truck, about those long book club nights, about their shared glances across dinner tables. And I realized that ignoring rot doesn't stop it from spreading. Hours later, I sat in my truck outside our house, the message still burning in my mind. Most men imagine betrayal as noise, shouting, tears, broken glass. Mine was quiet, surgical, a single sentence on a glowing screen. I didn't storm upstairs. I didn't confront anyone, because the moment you react, you lose control. And if there's one thing I understand, it's control. That night I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg, plead, or explode. I was going to plan. This wouldn't be about catching two people in the act. It would be about dismantling everything they built around that lie. Slowly, legally, completely. Revenge isn't rage. It's architecture. By morning, I would begin drafting blueprints. Not for buildings this time, but for payback. They say you really know who someone is when you build something with them. For 15 years, I thought I knew both Cheryl and Wayne better than anyone alive. When I met Wayne back in 2010, we were two men trying to outwork time itself. He was a site manager on a road expansion project. I was subcontracting with one rented bulldozer and a habit of skipping lunch to fix my own hydraulics. We bonded over motorcycles, grease, and the idea that loyalty meant never leaving a man stranded on the side of a highway. By the end of that job, we were brothers in everything but blood. 3 years later, when I risked everything to found Ironwood Forge, Wayne invested $30,000, nearly all his savings, for a 15% stake. He never once asked for a written guarantee. He just said, "If you're in, I'm in." That was the man I thought I knew. Cheryl and I had already been married 7 years. We'd survived the one-bedroom apartment with the leaky ceiling, the miscarriage that nearly tore her apart, the bank rejections that called me son while denying my loan. She believed in the dream when it was just dirt and diesel fumes. When we finally moved into the lake house her parents once said I'd never afford, I thought the battle was over. We had a home, a son in college, a thriving company. A circle of 3 people I trusted absolutely. It didn't break overnight. It started small, Wayne dropping by after work to drop off paperwork, Cheryl asking about his divorce, jokes that carried just a little too much warmth. You tell yourself it's innocent. You want it to be innocent. Because if you're wrong, the damage isn't just emotional, it's structural. A betrayal in friendship and marriage simultaneously is like wrought in a foundation, invisible until the entire frame shifts. I noticed how she'd reach out and touch his arm when she laughed, how her eyes lingered half a second longer than politeness allows. At Christmas, Wayne brought her a bottle of wine she loved, one I'd never heard her mention before. When I teased her about it later, she said, "Oh, he just remembers small things." That stung more than I let on. Still, I shoved it down. We men who build for a living get good at patching cracks instead of replacing beams. You fill it with more work, more hours, more proof that you deserve the life you have. That's how blindness hides inside hard work. If you're watching this and wondering how I didn't see it sooner, remember this. Loyalty and denial wear the same uniform. Both demand faith. Both reward consistency. You confuse effort with security. In business, we call it sunk cost fallacy. When you keep investing because you've already invested too much to walk away. In marriage, it's no different. You cling to the idea that shared history equals permanence. The truth is, trust isn't a structure you build once. It's maintenance, daily. And when you stop inspecting it, out of exhaustion or pride, rot finds its way in. Another reason people miss the signs is what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. When reality doesn't fit your belief, you'll twist reality before you question belief. I did exactly that. I told myself Wayne was lonely, Cheryl was kind, and I was overworked. A neat equation that let me sleep at night. Except it wasn't true. One Thursday, she left for book club. I was finishing invoices at the kitchen table when Wayne texted about a meeting he couldn't make because he had family plans. I smiled at the coincidence, still refusing to connect the dots. We choose comfort over clarity, until clarity becomes unavoidable. That was the world before the text, a world built on assumptions, dressed as trust. Looking back, I realize every man has blind spots. Mine just happened to be the 2 people I loved most. And when betrayal finally surfaced, it didn't just collapse my marriage, it rewrote my definition of loyalty itself. Because loyalty without boundaries isn't noble, it's dangerous. It gives good people permission to overlook bad behavior. And when you ignore boundaries long enough, someone eventually crosses them. By the time I recognized the pattern, it was already too late. All that was left was the moment every builder dreads. When you hear the first crack, and you realize the foundation you trusted is already shifting beneath you. The night I heard that crack, I didn't grab a hammer. I grabbed a plan. The night everything broke was supposed to be a celebration. I just landed the Patterson contract, the biggest in Ironwood Forge's history, double our business, triple our credibility. I even stopped on the way home to pick up Cheryl's favorite bottle of red, the one she saved for anniversaries. It was early spring, cold enough that my breath still fogged in the air as I stepped out of the truck. The porch light was on, but the house felt wrong before I even crossed the threshold. Too still, too quiet. When a place you love turns silent, it doesn't feel like peace. It feels like warning. Inside, the TV was off, the lights dim. Her car sat in the driveway, her purse on the table. But no Cheryl, just her phone on the counter, screen down, buzzing once, like it was keeping a secret. I wish I could say I resisted the urge to look, that I respected her privacy even then. But curiosity isn't what drives you in that moment. It's instinct. The same one that tells a builder when a load-bearing wall is about to fail. I turned the phone over. A message from Wayne. Left my jacket upstairs. Don't tell Ron I stopped by. That single line ended 15 years of friendship and 15 years of marriage all at once. I didn't shout, didn't even move for a while. I just stared at the words until they stopped looking like language and started looking like truth. Then I walked upstairs. The door to our bedroom was half open. Inside, Cheryl sat on the edge of the bed, holding Wayne's leather jacket, the one I'd given him for his 50th birthday. For a split second, she looked like a stranger in my house. When her eyes met mine, she froze, color draining from her face. "Ron," she said softly, "just my name, nothing else." I lifted the phone slightly. He left his jacket. She didn't deny it, didn't invent a story, didn't even look away, just nodded faintly, still clutching the jacket like a shield. "You're always working late," she said. "He was there for me. It's strange, as you expect rage to come in like a flood. Mine came like a quiet tide pulling out. I felt the love, the anger, the history, all of it, being drawn away into something cold and clear. I get it," I said, my voice steady. "I just need some time to process this." Then I turned, walked out, and closed the door behind me. No yelling, no plates thrown, just silence, the kind that burns hotter than fire. Most people think revenge starts with hatred. It doesn't. It starts with clarity. When you finally see who's been standing beside you, not as you imagined them, but as they really are, something inside you realigns. That night, I drove to my office. Ironwood Forge was empty, the only light coming from the vending machine near reception. I sat behind my desk, the same place where I'd built every contract and every dream for the last 15 years. And I realized that while Cheryl and Wayne had been busy dismantling my life in private, I'd been unintentionally building my defense in public. Paperwork, contracts, signatures, clauses. The same discipline that made me a good businessman was about to make me a dangerous enemy. I poured 2 fingers of whiskey, the good bottle we'd saved for closing the Patterson deal that morning, and just stared at it. Didn't drink, didn't blink. I thought about the irony. I'd spent my whole life building things. Fleets, machines, a company, a marriage, thinking construction was creation. But sometimes, construction is demolition with a purpose. And now, demolition was all that was left. If you've ever faced betrayal, remember this. Your silence is your blueprint. The louder they expect you to react, the more power your quiet gives you. Anger makes mistakes. Calmness collects information. And information is leverage. Every message, every clause, every receipt, those are beams in your neck structure. The people who betray you rarely cover their tracks. They rely on your emotions to destroy your logic. The best revenge stories, real ones, not movie ones, don't start with chaos. They start with a pen, a plan, and patience. That night, while they slept, I drew the first lines of my plan in my mind. I didn't need to break anything. I just needed to remove support. Let gravity do the rest. When you spend your life constructing things, you learn a simple truth. Anything that can be built can be taken apart, carefully, piece by piece. And that night, as dawn bled into Spokane's skyline, I decided to take everything apart. I didn't sleep. By 7 a.m., I was parked outside the downtown office of Harold Kessler, the corporate attorney who'd helped me incorporate Ironwood Forge 15 years earlier. He looked surprised to see me that early, tie half done, coffee still steaming. "Ron," he said, blinking at me over his glasses, "what's on fire?" "Not fire," I replied. "Rot, and I need to cut it out before it spreads." He motioned me inside. Harold had drafted every contract, every partnership clause we'd ever used. He knew the business like a surgeon knows anatomy. When I told him I wanted to trigger Article 7, he just stared. "You're serious?" I nodded. Article 7 was an insurance policy we'd buried in the original partnership agreement, a clause that allowed me to buy out a partner's shares at a predetermined discount if their personal conduct risked the company's reputation. We'd included it at Harold's insistence back when Ironwood was just 2 trucks and a dream. At the time, I was thinking about DUI arrests or gambling debts, not infidelity. 20 cents on the dollar, Harold said slowly. "You'll be buying Wayne out for a fraction of his current valuation." "I know." He studied me for a long time, then asked, "Do you have proof?" Without a word, I slid my phone across the desk. Screenshots, GPS logs, showing Wayne's truck at my house when I was on site, emails, messages, photos, evidence clean and undeniable. Harold scrolled silently. Finally, he sighed. "You've built yourself quite a paper fortress." "Not a fortress," I said. a blueprint for removal. By mid-morning, we'd assembled the documents, dissolution notice, valuation schedule, and termination clause. I wasn't just removing Wayne, I was cutting out his leverage completely. Every client relationship we shared would now default to me under a key man continuity clause I'd negotiated years ago. Another safeguard no one ever thought we'd need. As Harold printed the papers, he looked up. "This will get ugly, Ron." "It already is." He handed me the folder. "Once he signs, he's out. No appeal, no buyback, no arbitration. But if he refuses, you'll need to show that his behavior qualifies as detrimental. Personal affairs can be gray." I smiled faintly. "Then I'll make sure it's not gray." Here's the thing most people get wrong about revenge. They think it's about hurting someone. It's not. It's about reclaiming power. Quietly, legally, undeniably. I wasn't looking to humiliate Wayne. I was making sure he never had the chance to touch what I built again. There's a difference between retaliation and restoration. Retaliation is emotional, restoration is architectural. You remove damaged beams, reinforce the load-bearing ones, and rebuild stronger. If you're ever in a similar position, betrayed by a business partner, friend, or spouse, here's a truth I learned that day. Paper is protection. Contracts don't just exist for bad days. They're designed for exactly this day. Because emotion fades, but signatures, they stay. By sunset, the plan was in motion. Harold's assistant filed the legal notices under confidentiality. I went home, showered, and sat through dinner like nothing had changed. Cheryl asked if I was okay. I told her I was just tired. That was the last true thing I said to her. Over the next 48 hours, I set traps without moving a muscle. I backed up every company file, secured our client list, and reviewed bank transactions. What I found would later become my trump card. But at that moment, it was just numbers. Patterns that didn't fit. Meanwhile, I rehearsed my next meeting, the one that would decide everything. I called Wayne late Thursday afternoon. "Need to discuss the Patterson expansion," I said evenly. "Come by the office after hours. It's important." He agreed instantly. Old habits die hard. He still trusted me, the way I used to trust him. At 8 p.m. Friday, Wayne walked into my office for what he thought was a business meeting. He had no idea it was his exit interview from my life. Friday, 8 p.m. The Ironwood Forge yard was empty, the machines asleep under security lights. Inside my office, the only sound was the hum of the air unit and the faint tick of the wall clock, a metronome counting down to the moment everything changed. Wayne arrived right on time. He pushed the door open with the easy familiarity of someone who thought the room still belonged to him. "Hey buddy," he said, dropping into the chair across from my desk. "Patterson expansion this big, huh? Couldn't wait till morning?" I smiled slightly and slid a thick folder toward him. "Yeah, couldn't wait." He flipped it open. The header read, Article 7, Dissolution Agreement. I watched his eyes move from line to line. Confusion, shock, anger. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. "Exactly what it says. I'm buying out your shares." He blinked, incredulous. "On what grounds?" "Actions detrimental to the company's reputation." He leaned forward, lowering his voice like we were partners again, plotting against someone else. "Ron, if this is about Cheryl..." I cut him off. "You don't say her name in this office." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. He tried a different tone, the half apology, half accusation of a man still believing he could negotiate his way out. "Look, I know things haven't been great between you two. She was lonely. You were always working. It just happened." I almost laughed. 15 years of friendship, and that's his explanation. "It just happened." "It didn't just happen, Wayne," I said. "It took planning, lies, and a hell of a lot of nerve." He ran a hand through his hair, trying to regain the upper hand. "You've been absent, Ron, building your precious company while your marriage fell apart. When was the last time you even listened to her? You drove her to me." That's the moment I understood something about betrayal. It always tries to make itself your fault. I stayed calm. "So this is charity. You sleep with my wife out of concern." He flushed. "I'm not signing this. You can't force me out over a personal matter." "Actually," I said, Section 3, Paragraph 2. "Read it." He scanned the fine print he'd signed 15 years ago without a second thought. His jaw tightened. "You do this to me after everything we've built together? You did this to us, I replied. I'm just following the contract. He stood so fast, the chair toppled. Cheryl won't stand for this. She'll back me up. You should call her, I said. He stared at me, uncertain, then grabbed his phone and stormed out. Here's the truth. When someone betrays you, they expect explosion. They prepare for anger, not strategy. The moment you stay calm, you throw their script in the trash. Control isn't weakness, it's a weapon. It lets you turn every accusation into evidence, every word they say into leverage. Most people fight fire with fire. Builders fight it with architecture. Control the flow of oxygen until the flame dies on its own. That night wasn't about revenge yet. It was about proof. The moment Wayne left my office angry, he gave me what I needed. His reaction. Emotional, defensive, unprofessional, all documented on the security camera that recorded every meeting. Evidence that he wasn't acting in the company's interest. When you plan a counterattack, you don't just win once, you set up wins that keep unfolding. By the time he called Cheryl, I already knew the conversation that was coming. The next morning, he burst into my house without knocking. I was making coffee. "What did you say to her?" he shouted. "Cheryl's not answering my calls." Her sister said she left town. I didn't even look up. Maybe she needed time to think. He slammed a hand on the counter. "You threatened her, made her choose between me and your money." I set the cup down carefully. "I didn't have to threaten anyone, Wayne. I showed her 2 pieces of paper, the same ones you refused to read." He frowned. "What paper?" "The dissolution agreement and the prenup with the infidelity clause. If either spouse commits adultery, they forfeit all rights to community property, including shares of Ironwood Forge." He stared at me, stunned. "You're lying." I opened the drawer, pulled out the original document with both our signatures. He read it twice, color draining from his face. "You've been planning this for 15 years. "No," I said. "I've been protecting it for 15 years. He collapsed into a chair. "So that's it. You strip us both of everything." "Not everything," I said. "Just what you took from me." He didn't know it yet, but there was one more document waiting, the audit that would bury him for good. Wayne came back the next morning, but this time his swagger was gone. He looked smaller, like a man who'd finally realized the ground under him wasn't solid. Still, he tried to bluff his way through. "Ron, listen," he started, forcing a chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. "Let's not destroy everything we've built over mistakes. We can fix this." I poured 2 mugs of coffee, slid one across the counter, and opened a second folder. "This isn't about fixing," I said quietly. "It's about finishing." He frowned, not yet understanding. "Finishing what?" "The audit." In the 48 hours between discovering his betrayal and calling that late-night meeting, I'd reviewed every line of Ironwood's financials, invoices, rental logs, vendor statements, and what I found didn't add up. Certain projects had equipment listed that was never actually used, expense reimbursements with mismatched receipts, vendor payments slightly inflated, too small to trigger alarms but too consistent to be random. I handed him the papers. "Your department's numbers, 3 years of records, $173,000 unaccounted for." He skimmed the pages, color draining from his face. "Ron, that's not what? Not embezzlement?" he stammered. "It's temporary. I was going to put it back." "With what money?" I asked. "Your divorce cleaned you out, then the down payment on that new house. You needed cash to impress Cheryl." He froze, eyes wide. His silence was confession enough. "This is blackmail," he muttered. "No," I said evenly. "It's business. You signed the dissolution papers and this audit never sees the light of day. You fight me and I take it to the district attorney." He stared at me, the man he once called brother, and saw no weakness left. That's when he understood the real betrayal. He thought he was the predator. He just realized he was the one being hunted. His voice cracked. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" "No," I said. "I never thought I'd have to think of this." He didn't answer. He just sat there, shoulders slumped. The folder still open between us. The paper smelled faintly of coffee and fear. I gave him 24 hours to decide. He signed in 12. By the next afternoon, Wayne Hoffman's 15% of Ironwood Forge belonged entirely to me, at 20 cents on the dollar. A lifetime of friendship reduced to a single signature. People hear stories like this and call them revenge fantasies. But what they miss is that revenge isn't the point. It's the clarity that comes when justice and control finally align. Leverage isn't about shouting or threats. It's about information. Whoever holds the paper holds the power. In business, that paper is contracts. In betrayal, it's proof. If you ever face deceit, whether from a partner, colleague, or spouse, don't rush to act. Pause, gather, document, because one folder of evidence is worth more than 100 angry words. Emotion fades. Evidence endures. That night, as Wayne cleared out his office, I stood in the hallway and watched. He took his photos, his mug, his tools, the same ones we'd used to build our first job site together. He didn't meet my eyes. In the corner of the room, the company plaque still read, "Founded by Ronald Winters and Wayne Hoffman." I didn't remove it. Not yet. Some ghosts need to stay visible for a while, as reminders. When he finally walked out, he didn't say goodbye, and I didn't ask him to. By the end of the week, I'd personally met with our top 3 clients. Each handshake secured renewed contracts under my name only. The message was clear. Ironwood Forge wasn't collapsing. It was consolidating. And as for Cheryl, she was still at her sister's in Portland, avoiding calls. I gave her space, just enough rope to see what she'd do with it. My lawyer had already prepared the divorce paperwork. All that was left was the final confrontation. The difference this time was that I'd already won. When Cheryl came home, she thought she'd be negotiating forgiveness. What she didn't know was that I'd already negotiated her exit. A week after Wayne signed his exit papers, Cheryl came home. I was in the backyard splitting firewood when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Her car door shut softly, like she was afraid of making noise in her own driveway. She stood by the fence for a moment before walking over, hands clasped in front of her, eyes red but dry. There was no drama left, just a woman rehearsing the words she hoped would work. "We need to talk," she said. I set the axe down. About us. About what happens next. Her voice trembled, but her tone was practiced, the kind of calm that hides panic. I wiped my hands on my jeans and nodded toward the porch. "All right, let's talk." Inside, she sat at the kitchen table, posture straight, every movement deliberate. She'd clearly practiced this, maybe in front of a mirror, maybe coached by someone who thought they understood me. "I made mistakes," she began. "I know I hurt you, but people make mistakes, Ron. Marriages recover from them." I watched her eyes as she spoke, not the words, but the rhythm of them. There was no love in her tone, just negotiation. "Is that what this is?" I asked. "A recovery plan?" She blinked. "I want to fix this. We can go to counseling. We can rebuild." I nodded slowly. Funny, because I already rebuilt. She frowned. "What do you mean?" I reached across the counter and slid a folder toward her. Inside, divorce papers. Her hand trembled slightly as she opened it. "Just like that? 15 years and you're throwing it away?" "No," I said calmly. "You already did. I'm just handling the paperwork." She flipped through the pages until she reached the clause highlighted in yellow, Section 4, Infidelity Forfeiture. "What is this?" she whispered. "That's the prenuptial agreement your parents insisted on," I said. "The one I agreed to and quietly added my own amendment." Her eyes widened. "That old thing, that was 20 years ago. It can, I interrupted, and it does. The clause was simple. If either spouse commits adultery, they forfeit all rights to community property acquired during the marriage, including business ownership, retirement accounts, and joint real estate." She looked up, pale. "You can't possibly—" "I can," I said, "and I am." She sank into the chair, realization hitting like a slow avalanche. "Here's something most people don't understand. When you've been betrayed, you can't confuse forgiveness with surrender. Forgiveness is emotional. Surrender is structural. I didn't need revenge on Cheryl. I needed closure that protected me. Fairness doesn't always look gentle. In fact, sometimes fairness feels cold because it's built on boundaries, not emotions. Generosity after betrayal is like leaving your wallet on the table after someone already stole from you. It doesn't make you noble. It makes you a target." When she said, "But I'm entitled to half," I almost smiled. "Your lawyer should read the prenup more carefully," I told her. She looked up suddenly. "Where's Wayne in all this?" I picked up the divorce papers, slid another folder beneath them. "He's gone?" "What do you mean?" I bought out his shares at 20 cents on the dollar, and the money he embezzled, it's being repaid through the sale of his assets. She stared at me, disbelief turning to shock. Embezzled? Yes, I said. Turns out the lifestyle he used to impress you was funded with company money. So in a way, you weren't just cheating on me. You were spending my money to do it. Her lips parted, but no words came out. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't need volume. It just needs evidence. She finally whispered, "Who are you?" For a moment, I looked at her. The woman who once stood beside me at a leaking wedding tent 15 years ago, promising forever. Now she looked like a stranger who'd accidentally wandered into my home. "I'm someone who finally stopped carrying people planning to drop me," I said. She stood slowly, closed the folder, and left without another word. No tears, no goodbye. Just the sound of the door clicking shut, like the final period on a story that had gone on too long. I thought that would be the end, but fate had one last twist, a deal that would change everything I built. One final time. 6 weeks after Wayne's jacket turned my life upside down, I found myself sitting in a glass conference room, 20 floors above downtown Spokane. Across from me were Arthur Bowman, CEO of Drift Shade Limited, the second largest construction conglomerate in eastern Washington, and his lead counsel. Between us lay a stack of contracts thick enough to buy freedom twice over. Arthur leaned back, studying me. "One last chance to reconsider, Ron. Once you sign, there's no going back." I smiled faintly. "I'm not the one who'll have regrets." He chuckled, slid the pen across the table, and said, "Then let's make history." I picked it up and signed my name on the final page. Ironwood Forge, acquired by Drift Shade Limited. Sale price, twice the market value. Employment term, 2-year president's contract with full autonomy. When the last page was notarized, I exhaled. Not relief, not joy, just release. The idea of selling hadn't been part of my revenge plan. It had started as a business call 2 weeks earlier, Arthur's assistant reaching out after hearing about Wayne's departure. "Word travels fast," I told him. "In this industry," Arthur replied, "reputation is gravity. Yours just doubled." He wasn't wrong. Clients weren't loyal to Ironwood's logo. They were loyal to me. Every major deal in the last decade had my signature on it. The company was me, and I'd already rebuilt my name to stand alone. Drift Shade had been trying to expand its heavy equipment division for years. With Wayne gone and the Patterson project locked down, Ironwood was a perfect acquisition. They offered twice its valuation. I could have refused, could have stayed, rebuilt, hired new partners. But every corner of that office reminded me of ghosts, so I said yes. Because sometimes survival isn't about rebuilding. It's about re-entering the world under your own terms. Arthur's secretary appeared at the door, tablet in hand. "Mr. Bowman," she said, "there's someone here asking for Mr. Winters, a Mr. Hoffman." Arthur's brows rose. "You want me to?" I shook my head. "Send him in." Wayne entered, face drawn tight, a cocktail of anger and disbelief. He didn't even glance at Arthur. He just glared at me. "You sold the company?" he snapped. "Without offering me the chance to buy back in?" I stood, straightened my jacket. "You didn't read the fine print, Wayne. You forfeited that right when you signed your dissolution." He slammed his palms on the table. "How much?" "17 million, I said. He blinked, stunned. 17, you son of a... Careful, I warned. You're standing on thin ice and it's already cracking. Arthur cleared his throat politely, signaling to security. Wayne backed toward the door, his fury giving way to something worse. Realization. "My shares were worth about 600,000, he said slowly. "You bought them for 120. I nodded. "Seems like I got a good deal." He glared, lips trembling. "This isn't over." "Actually," I said, collecting my copy of the contract, "it is." He left without another word. The door clicked shut behind him, a quieter ending than he deserved. People like to imagine closure as emotional peace, but real closure is contractual. It's the line at the bottom of a deal that says, "You don't own me anymore." Selling Ironwood wasn't defeat, it was surgery. I cut away the infected parts and left the healthy tissue to heal. Here's a truth worth remembering. Sometimes you have to sell the house that burned you just to stop smelling the smoke. And when you do, you learn what freedom actually costs and why it's worth every penny. A year later, I stood on the deck of my new cabin overlooking the Columbia River. Not the vacation place Cheryl got in the divorce. A new one, bigger, cleaner, quieter. Outback was a workshop where I was restoring a 1967 Harley Davidson, the bike I'd wanted since I was 19. The divorce had been final for 9 months. She took what I offered, the smaller cabin, a modest settlement, after her lawyer confirmed the prenup was airtight. Last I heard, she'd moved to Seattle, trying to start over. Wayne didn't fare as well. He tried launching a small equipment rental business, but our clients wanted no part of him. Word had spread about his irregular accounting. Eventually, he took a salaried position with a tiny outfit in Idaho. For a man who once owned part of the biggest contractor in eastern Washington, it was poetic. I poured a cup of coffee, leaned against the railing, and watched the river move slow and sure beneath the sunrise. My phone buzzed. A text from Thomas, my son. "Coming home this weekend, you free for dinner?" I smiled. "Always free for you." At 53, my life wasn't what I thought it would be. My marriage was gone. My best friend was a stranger, and the company I'd built now wore another name. But I was still standing, debt-free, self-made, clean. And for the first time in years, the silence around me didn't sound like warning. It sounded like peace. I thought revenge would feel like victory. Instead, it felt like clarity, the kind that tells you who you are when the dust finally settles. When the noise finally died down, the lawyers, the signatures, the headlines in the trade papers, I realized something unexpected. The real story wasn't what Wayne and Cheryl did. It was what I learned about people, protection, and power. Because every betrayal, no matter how personal, teaches you something scalable, lessons that apply to marriage, business, even friendship. Let me show you what I mean. I used to believe loyalty was built on emotion, shared history, shared laughter, shared scars. But emotion is drywall, nice to look at, useless under stress. Structure is what holds up a building when storms hit. Contracts, boundaries, written clarity. Wayne had 15 years of my friendship, but I had one signed document. Guess which survived? In business, never rely on assumed alignment. Write it down. Define the exits before you need them. Partnerships don't fail when people change. They fail when the paperwork doesn't expect them to. My biggest mistake wasn't trusting people. It was failing to install guardrails. I wanted to believe friendship made us immune to betrayal. But boundaries aren't fences. They're foundations. Healthy boundaries say, this is where you end and I begin. Without them, people don't know when they're crossing a line, and some will keep walking until you stop them. In relationships, it's the same. When Cheryl started turning her phone face down, when book club nights stretched longer, those were boundary breaches disguised as habits. I ignored them, and silence became permission. If there's one advantage builders have, it's patience. When you learn to work with steel and concrete, you learn not to rush what needs curing. Revenge obeys the same rule. I didn't explode when I found out. I documented. I planned. Every message, every receipt became part of a blueprint. Because the truth is, rage feels good, but calm wins wars. And nothing disarms a liar faster than a man who refuses to shout. When I triggered Article 7, people assumed it was luck, that I happened to have the right clause at the right time. It wasn't luck, it was foresight. 15 years earlier, my lawyer insisted we include a bad actor clause. We thought it was overkill. Turns out it saved the company. Here's a real-world example. In 2019, a small California construction firm nearly collapsed when one co-founder gambled away corporate funds. The only reason they survived was a clause allowing removal for reputational damage. Without it, the firm would have been tied up in court for years. Paperwork is boring until it's the only thing keeping you afloat. Before all this, I thought success was about accumulation. More contracts, more properties, more stability. But pain strips away illusions. It shows you what actually matters. When the dust settled, what remained wasn't money or status. It was freedom. Freedom to rebuild. Freedom to sleep without wondering who was texting whom. That's the paradox of loss. It's subtraction that reveals value. I don't hate Cheryl or Wayne anymore. Hate is maintenance. It keeps you tied to the person who wronged you. I forgave them, but I didn't forget. Forgiveness cleans the wound. Forgetting reopens it. I can remember without bleeding. That's enough. When betrayal happens, people rush to tell your story for you. Gossip, speculation, rumor. But silence is not weakness. Silence is authorship. If you stay quiet long enough to write your own ending, you get to decide what legacy remains. Ironwood Forge's story didn't end with scandal. It ended with a sale, a handshake, and a quiet man rebuilding a motorcycle by a river. It's been a year since I last saw Wayne Hoffman's face. 9 months since Cheryl's lawyer signed her final settlement. And today, as I stand on the deck of my cabin overlooking the Columbia River, the air smells like sawdust and rain. Clean, weightless, honest. The cabin sits on 5 acres of quiet land. No neighbors, no noise except for the river and the occasional hum of my workshop out back, where the 1967 Harley Davidson waits under a tarp. Every weekend I rebuild a little more of it. A new chain, fresh chrome, a rebuilt carburetor. Some people call it therapy. I call it reassembly. When you've spent years watching things fall apart, there's something sacred about putting pieces back together, slowly, deliberately, without deadlines. People think peace arrives naturally after chaos. It doesn't. Peace is built the same way as strength, through repetition, through choices, through quiet consistency. At first, I didn't know what to do with the silence. No ringing phones, no late-night arguments, just stillness. For weeks, I kept waiting for something, a new betrayal, a sudden crisis, because that's what constant vigilance does. It conditions you to distrust calm. But the world stayed still, and slowly, I started to believe that stillness could be home. My son Thomas visits on weekends. He's 20 now, studying engineering. Same drive, same eyes, none of the bitterness. When he's here, we fix the bike together, trade bad jokes, burn the steaks, and talk about nothing important. And maybe that's the point. Not everything has to be important. Sometimes survival means rediscovering simplicity. People online call my story a revenge masterpiece. I get the appeal, the calm destruction, the poetic justice, the airtight clauses. But here's the truth. Revenge is a bridge, not a destination. It doesn't make you whole. It just carries you over the wreckage long enough to reach the other side. When you step off it, you're left with choices. Do you keep walking forward, or do you stand there staring back at the flames? If you keep staring, you stay defined by what hurt you. If you move on, you become defined by what you build next. For me, moving on meant letting go of the idea that everything broken had to be fixed. Some things aren't meant to be rebuilt. They're meant to be remembered as warnings, not blueprints. There's an emptiness that comes after victory, the quiet you don't expect. It's not loneliness, it's clarity. You look around and realize how much space there is once you stop carrying people who were never meant to stay. That space is terrifying at first, then freeing. It becomes room for new work, new peace, maybe even new love someday. But for now, solitude feels like truth. I sip my coffee and watch the river cut through the valley, relentless and patient. There's something poetic about water. It never fights what blocks it. It finds a new path. Maybe that's what healing really is, finding a new flow instead of forcing the old one back into place. My phone buzzes. A message from Thomas. Got the carburetor working, bringing it next weekend? I smile, type back. Perfect, we'll finish it together. The screen locks and my reflection stares back, older, steadier, quieter. For the first time in years, I don't see a man defined by loss. I see a builder again, not of machines, not of companies, but of himself. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Don't live your life guarding walls. Build foundations that can survive when they fall. Contracts protect your business. Boundaries protect your soul. And when betrayal comes, because it always does, remember, you don't have to destroy anyone to win. You just have to make sure they can't destroy you. In the end, I didn't rebuild Ironwood Forge. I rebuilt myself, stronger, quieter, and finally at peace.